Well, in Denmark, this has resulted for a lot of uncertainty for migrants because, as you say, if the situation of the home country is reviewed periodically and clearly at the same time the bar has been lowered for what is considered safe and stable for the home country, then it can introduce this level of uncertainty, which probably is a big part of the reason why Denmark's asylum seeker numbers have dropped so much. Now, it's natural for the British Labour government to be looking to Denmark. Denmark's government is also a centre-left government. The Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, sits in the same centre-left European group as British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. But also, currently, this model by Denmark is receiving generally positive views here in Brussels. Now, Denmark right now holds the rotating presidency of the EU Council. You can see that sign behind me welcoming people to the presidency here at the Council building. And really, Mette Frederiksen has been in the driver's seat on migration policy because other countries are looking very interestedly at what's happened in Denmark. In particular, she's teamed up with Italy's right-wing Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, on this migration issue, and the two of them have really been leading the way in the Council. Politics makes for interesting bedfellows. One person from the center-left, one person from the far right, coming together on this migration issue. But really, you can see how the Danish Prime Minister has gotten ahead on this issue when no one else in the Council seems to have had very good answers to this, and particularly when so many on the right side of the spectrum have just made a lot of noise but actually not reduced numbers. Denmark now has the strictest asylum policy in the European Union, and that's coming from a center-left government.
Just realised where you are, Dave. We can't quite work out the sign behind you. Can see the bright lights, but you're in the Justice Lipsis building, aren't you, in the European Council? Just listening to Dave, Megan,
Indeed.
He makes a very interesting point about the weight. There's another point I want to raise with you, which is about conversations, arguments about whether Britain, and it has been to some degree previously in Denmark, how you work with the European Convention on Human Rights. We've had mouths off from Mr Farage and others saying actually it's not the place to sit. Britain has to relook at this. Shabana Mahmood today talking about how they want to change Article 8, who thinks this is on the right to a family life. And it's about how judges interpret and wanting to explain to them. Let me explain to you, I think, make sure we're getting a sense of this. Basically, such as telling the judges to tighten those, the application of it to family, close family and children who would come over with refugees, and also giving more weight to the wider public interest when it comes to each case. What's your understanding of how that could change?
Yeah, so I mean, there's been momentum growing across the EU, across ECHR signatories for reform to the ACHR, and so there are a number of interested countries right now. The UK is one of them. This announcement today seems to be what they're planning to do domestically, so providing guidance to the way that the Human Rights Act, which puts the ECHR into national law, on how it's interpreted by judges. To be honest, it's not totally clear what they're proposing yet. We're waiting for the statement in Parliament. But because Article 8 review, it does already allow for a balancing test, which means courts and governments can weigh the rights of migrants against overall public order already. I think what they're saying is that factually they're going to try and give more weight to the public order side to prevent people from resisting deportation, especially for family members who aren't direct family that they don't live with.
In the meantime, Dave, as we wait for this, just listening to Megan on the UK system, you mentioned Giorgia Meloni and that this scenario where both her and Mette Frederiksen, centre-left on the hard right, working together. It's not one big working conglomerate right now, though, is it? And it is worth saying, kind of standing up, not just against European leaders, but to some degree against President Trump as well on his right-wing policies, on his policies of migration, is there in the south of Europe, in Spain. Pedro Sanchez, tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, Pedro Sanchez has probably been the lone voice really strongly resisting this move on migration. We saw at the last European Council last month, they had a discussion on migration, and he was really the only voice arguing for a more, let's say, liberal, more left-leaning position. Emmanuel Macron was not particularly vocal in that discussion. But he is in kind of the minority at the moment. And we see, you mentioned the ECHR, that is something separate from the European Union. Union, that's the European Court of Human Rights administered by the Council of Europe in Strasbourg, different organization. That Denmark's policy has come in for some trouble with that, but really around the edges. So the two things that the ECHR has said are a problem is this family reunification. They say this 3-year time period, again, as you were just saying, violates this right to a family life. And secondly, these parallel lives designations in some of the low-income housing where the asylum seekers are kept. They've also found problems with that. But Denmark is trying to get that changed. And they've joined with a number of EU countries writing a letter to the ECHR saying you need to change these rules because they were invented 75 years ago for an entirely different time. And the ECHR has been fairly receptive to that. So I think if you're looking at the situation in the UK and what the different political parties are telling people, Reform is saying, let's just pull out of the ECHR, there's no hope for reform. In the EU, governments are working with the ECHR possibly to update those definitions. And there has been progress on that. So it would be rather unfortunate if the UK left the ECHR and then the following month they changed the rules to actually be more in line with the migration policy that the Labour government wants. So I think Labour right now is pointing out that other governments are able to work with this as well.